Chapter 24. Smoke. "Fire!" James screamed. Dave was sprawled across the double bed, with his bum on display and his duvet tangled around his legs. "Come on!" James shouted frantically, slapping Dave on the leg. "Dave, wake up!" Dave rolled onto his back and opened his eyes. "What's the matter?" "I think there's a fire in my room." Dave shot up and flicked on the new IKEA lamp beside his bed. "Are you sure?" he asked, as he rolled out of bed and pulled his shorts up his legs. "I'll call the fire brigade," James said, reaching for his phone. "Did you see flames?" Dave asked. "Maybe the smell blew in from somewhere out the back. Let me check it out first." James lowered his phone as Dave jogged up to his bedroom and rested his palm against the door. "It doesn't feel hot, James. Did it feel hot when you opened the door?" James shook his head. "No, just really smelly." Dave opened the door a few centimetres. Both boys caught the burning smell, accompanied by a whirring noise. Once Dave was satisfied there were no flames, he reached in and flipped on the light. The room was engulfed in a grey haze. Dave stepped across to the window and flung it open. James followed him in and realised the smell was coming from the back of the computer. "I must have left it switched on," James said, reaching under the desk and yanking the plug out of the wall. Both boys leaned over the tower case standing on the desktop as the whirring fan slowed and a plume of dirty air began seeping out via the CD-ROM drive at the front. Dave tried to turn the computer around to get a look in the back and locate the source of the smell, but the metal case was hot to the touch. He grabbed a dirty tracksuit top off the floor and used it as a mitten. "Jesus!" Dave gasped as he squinted into the back of the computer. "This fan is all clogged up with dust. Didn't you clean it out before you plugged it in? Didn't they teach you that computers run hot when you learned about computer hacking?" "I didn't think," James said weakly. "Man," Dave said, as he wafted his hand under his nose. "It's totally clogged up with grease and dust in here." James was furious. "My bed and all my clothes and everything are gonna stink," he sulked. "I'll have to wash the whole lot tomorrow." Dave peeled a greasy worm of dust from between the fan blades at the back of the computer and flicked it at James. If this had been left much longer, it could easily have gone up in flames. Dave's tone changed abruptly from shocked to curious. "What the? I've never seen that before." "What?" James asked, as he crouched down beside Dave to take a look. "There's something behind the fan. See? Like a plastic bag." "Oh yeah," James nodded. "I'll get my multi-tool." James grabbed the fold-out tool from a sports bag under his bed, and Dave used it to undo the 4 screws that held the computer case together. The metal was still warm, so Dave draped the tracksuit top over before lifting it away. The bag Dave had spotted was taped to the inside of the case, and the clear plastic felt tacky, like it had been close to melting. He ripped the bag away and unravelled it. There was a mass of green strands, like tea leaves, in the bottom. "Marijuana," Dave grinned, as he gave the contents a sniff. "Ooh, I think we've uncovered Will's stash." "Makes sense," James nodded. "Hannah said Will was stoned off his head half the time. And if his parents snooped, they might have turned out his drawers and looked under the mattress, but you can bet they wouldn't have opened up his computer." James stared at the computer's innards and spotted something else. It was a purple envelope, wedged under the hard drive. He slid it out and removed a cheap-looking birthday card with a picture of a footballer on it. James read the inscription out loud. "Dear William, have a fabulous 18th birthday, Nana and Pop." But the envelope contained more. James's eyebrows shot upwards as he pulled out a thin wad of 50-pound notes and a CD-ROM with Pat Pat written on the label. "And the plot thickens," Dave said dramatically. "How much is that?" "You count," James said, throwing the money at Dave. "I want to know what's on this disc." James slid his laptop out from under the bed. He put it on the desk and flipped up the lid. 2,200 smackaroos, Dave said, while the laptop booted up. Not a bad haul for an unemployed 18-year-old. James blew the dust off the CD-ROM before putting it into the drive on the side of his laptop. It spun for a few seconds before an error message popped up. This disk is not Microsoft Windows compatible. Do you wish to exit Windows and run this program in MS-DOS mode? Yes/cancel. James had done an entire lesson about MS-DOS when he'd learned about computer hacking, but he could hardly remember it. Dave, help us out here, will you? Dave looked at the screen. Click yes, he said. MS-DOS stands for Microsoft Disk Operating System. It's what everyone used before Windows came out. James was confronted by a black screen with a single marking on it. C > colon. Oh, I should know this, James groaned. What's that thingy I do to get a list of all the files on the disk? Pass it over, Dave said, grabbing the laptop. You need to type dir, which is short for directory. Dave typed it, and a list of about 300 files scrolled up the screen and whizzed off the top. He scrolled through before pointing out one called cpx.exe. Can you remember what .exe means? Dave asked. It's the same as in Windows. It's short for executable, which is another word for a program, James said. Exactly, Dave nodded. And the batch of files next to it with .cpx at the end of their names are saved files that work within that application. Dave picked one of the .cpx files at random and typed its name. The screen flickered to a crude depiction of a roulette wheel, and the laptop played a couple of bars of Viva Las Vegas before a screen of text popped up. Welcome to CPX, Casino Module for Nimbus Accounting System. Copyright GamLogic Core 1987. Please enter your operator password. Dave correctly guessed that the password was pat. A list of options opened up on the screen. 1. Inputs. 2. Staff. 3. Payroll. 4. Cash account. 5. Nominal ledger. 6. More options. Dave was mystified. This must have come out of some old computer. But why would Will have it? God knows, James shrugged. Maybe it's just data he found on a second-hand PC. Hannah mentioned that Will was a serious computer geek. He took computers apart and made a bit of money upgrading them and setting them up for people and stuff. But that doesn't explain why he burned the data onto a CD and hid it inside another computer, Dave said. There's got to be more to it than that. We'll open up the files. See if you can work out what casino it belonged to, James suggested. Dave selected option 1 and a screen popped up with a list of data fields. Golden Sun Casino, Octopus House, London SE2, James read aloud. Then he gasped. Holy turd on a stick. What? Dave asked. Millie's list, the one I showed you with all the robberies on it. Have you still got it? I tossed it after you showed me. We can't leave stuff like that around with Max, Pete and Sonia coming in and out every 5 minutes. Okay, forget that, James said. Switch that disk off for a minute and go onto the internet. Do a news search for Golden Sun Casino and see what you get. It took James's laptop a couple of minutes to shut down, reboot and connect to the internet, but a quick Google news search confirmed his suspicions. Golden Sun Casino robbery nets over £90,000. BBC London News, 3rd of June 2004. London. A security guard was seriously injured following an armed raid on the Golden Sun Casino. The raid took place over... Click here to see 8 related stories. Dave grinned at James. Well remembered. The only snag is, Leon would have needed way more than 90 grand to buy that pub, especially if he had to share the loot with partners. But look at the date on that web article. June 2004 ties up perfectly, James said. It's obviously not the whole story, but you can't tell me it's a coincidence that a kid who lives on this block has information about a casino that was robbed at exactly the time Leon came into the big money. Dave nodded. I think Millie's on duty tonight. I'll leave a message about this on her answer phone. You contact the 24-hour desk on campus. Email them the data on that disk and get them to send it to MI5 for a detailed analysis. Carbon copy the message to John Jones so he knows what's going on as soon as he gets to work in the morning. Chapter 25. Glamour. By the time James had converted the information on the CD into a format that could be read by Windows and attached to an email, it was gone 1 a.m. He dragged his duvet and mattress through to the living room to escape the lingering smell of burnt dust. Dave had already set off for his first morning's work on the car lot when James got woken up by a text message from campus. Am on the case. Well done. Speak later. John. James snapped his phone shut and snuggled up. He fancied a lie-in after the late night, but realised he had to get off his butt and go to the laundromat, unless he was prepared to walk around smelling like a bonfire for the rest of the week. It was a quiet morning on the lot. Pete had gone fishing with a couple of mates from college. Dave waxed cars, and Leon watched daytime TV in the cabin until the first customer turned up. She wanted to test drive a Vauxhall Astra with a Car of the Week sticker in the front window. Back in a flash, Leo yelled as he clambered into the car with his customer. Any problems? Go next door and speak to George in the pub. If any more customers turn up, be polite. I'll be back in under half an hour and tell them I'll make it worth their while for waiting. Once Leon drove off, Dave strolled into the office. He bent under Leon's desk and plugged a flash memory drive into the USB socket on the front of Leon's computer. The machine was already on and had no security whatsoever, not even a basic password. Dave simply clicked on the My Computer folder and dragged the icon for the hard drive across to the window that had popped up when he'd plugged in the miniature drive. It took 5 slightly nervous minutes to copy everything over. Dave was back to waxing, with the contents of his boss's computer tucked into his shorts, when Leon returned. He squeezed his barrel-shaped body out of the Astra and led his customer into the cabin to sort out the fine points of the deal, emerging 10 minutes later and shaking her hand enthusiastically before she drove off the lot. If every customer was as dumb as her, I'd be driving round in a Rolls Royce, Leon grinned as he sauntered up to Dave with a finger in his ear. She could have got that same car at a supermarket for $600 less than what she paid me. Not a bad rack on her either. Dave nodded. Yeah, but a few too many miles on the clock for my taste. Let's lock the gates for half an hour and we'll get a fry-up. My treat. The Palm Hill Grill was on the corner a few hundred metres from the lot. The staff and regulars all knew Leon. A couple of elderly men sucked roll-ups at the table next to Dave and Leon. The other diners were spattered in paint or brick dust. Bacon, beans, 2 fried eggs, bubble, fried slice, and a mug of tea, Dave said, when the waitress came over to the table. She was small and curvy, with pouty lips and a spray of zits across her forehead. Look but don't touch, Dave, Leon grinned. My Pete's been after little Lorna for 2 years. Everyone in the cafe roared with laughter, except Lorna, who flushed bright pink. Dave realised this was a good moment to find out if anything had ever gone on between Leon and Will. So did you hear about my brother's new computer? Dave asked. Leon shook his head as he drank a mouthful of tea. He got off with Hannah Clark. She took pity and gave it to him, along with some bits of furniture. Lovely young girl, that Hannah, Leon nodded. Quite friendly with my Lisa, though she's being sent to some posh school now. It belonged to Hannah's cousin, Will. James left it plugged in and the poxy thing was clogged up with dust. It overheated and damn near burned us out. I blasted his room with air freshener, but it still reeks in there. One of the old men at the next table overheard. Isn't Will Clark the young fella who came off the roof? He asked, with a heavy Irish accent. Yeah, Dave nodded. The man shook his head slowly. A real pity that was. Tragedy, Leon said. Really bright kid. He was only about 13 when I got my first computer on the lot, but everyone told me Will was the bee's knees. I had him over for a couple of afternoons, and he set everything up for me and showed me a few tricks. When Max wanted a computer in his room, I got hold of a dodgy one off a bloke in the pub. Will came over and fixed it up. You know, put the Windows disk on it and the latest games. It would have cost hundreds to have bought the real stuff. Dave was satisfied. He couldn't push further without seeming suspicious, though he'd fish for more later. The Irishman looked at Dave with the bloodshot eyeballs of a man with a serious taste for drink. Why do you think that boy killed himself? How should I know? Dave shrugged. I just moved here, so I never even met the guy. But you're a young person, the Irishman explained, so I thought you'd know how these things go. Drugs killed him, Leon interrupted, with the authority of a man who weighed over 100 kilos. Whether he fell or whether he topped himself, it was the drugs messing with Will's mind that made all the problems. Both the old men nodded sincerely. It's true. It's terrible what these young fellas pump into themselves. The cook was weaving between the tables holding Leon and Dave's breakfasts. There you go, boys. Enjoy. Cheers, Joe, Leon said, as he grabbed the salt and showered it over a set breakfast, with extra sausage, extra fried egg, and 4 slices of toast. I'm absolutely famished. The cook looked at Dave. Course, you know the real reason why Leon doesn't like kids doing drugs? Dave shook his head. Why? Because he wants all yous in his pub, drinking his beer and smoking his cigarettes. Dave smirked, but the 2 old geezers at the next table started wailing like it was the funniest thing ever. One of them pounded the table so hard that the brown sauce bottle tipped over and rolled onto the floor. Oh, that's a good one. He wants them in his pub. The other old man exploded into a machine gun laugh right in Dave's ear. Leon's beer and fags, he snorted. Good one, Joe. James lugged his stuff to the laundromat and spent 12 quid washing the smell of smoke out of clothes and bedding. He got into a tedious conversation with the manager. She rambled on about her son, who was in the army. She told James it would be a good career for a handsome boy like him. James didn't mind answering the first couple of questions, but when it started to seem like the woman wanted to know his entire life story, he got ratty. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. You know, I can't really talk to you, James grinned. You see, I'm a secret agent. I work for an undercover organisation called CHERUB, and if I told you any more, I'd have to kill you. You don't have to be bloody sarcastic, the woman said sourly, crossing her arms as she stormed off in a huff. I was only making a bit of conversation to pass the time. James felt like an asshole. He'd only made the comment out of boredom, but the woman looked really upset. Then the door jammed on one of the dryers, and he had to go and ask her for help. The manager did her job switching off the power to reset the machine, but the look on her face as she refunded James's coins could have cracked a boulder. 2.5 hours after entering, James emerged onto Palm Hill High Street holding 4 giant carrier bags of dry washing. He threw them into the back of Dave's car, which was parked on a double yellow. What's the matter with you? Dave asked, as James slumped miserably into the passenger seat beside him. I'd sooner have spent the morning in school, James huffed. That's how bad it was. Dave didn't look sympathetic. Yeah? Well, I just spent a morning washing and hoovering out cars. This woman brought in a part exchange. Her kid must have spat about 50 lumps of gum into the ashtrays, and I had to chip it all out. Gross, James gasped, screwing up his face. I guess that is worse than doing the laundry. Dave smiled. I signed up for parachute jumps, exotic islands, and getting chased down mountains by masked men on snowmobiles. Yeah, James giggled. And what do we get? Chewed up gum and laundry duty. Anyway, the chairman was heading down to Whitehall for some meeting, and John hitched a lift in the chopper, so we're meeting up at Millie's house for a conference. It's 10 miles out, over Romford way. Get the map book out from under the seat. I know how to get there, but I'm not sure about the local streets when we arrive. Millie lived in a semi-detached house with a Toyota RAV4 finished in a girly metallic purple on her driveway. She opened her front door as they pulled up, and the boys walked down a hallway and through to the kitchen. John Jones sat at a knotted pine table with 2 plates of sliced cake set out in the centre. James and Dave both used the toilet before settling down and grabbing chunks of Battenberg while Millie made the tea. "I bumped into your sister early this morning," John said, looking at James as he bit the marzipan off the edge of his cake. "She's just got back from the summer hostel." James nodded. "Did she say anything?" "Not much," John said. "She's looking very tanned, and she asked how you were. I told her you'd give her a call when you got the chance." "Cool," James nodded. "I'll ring her after she's finished lessons." Millie put the boys' mugs on the table and sat herself down. James read his mug before his first mouthful. Metropolitan Police Squash Club, written beneath 2 crossed rackets. "Okay," John said, gently rapping his hand on the table to get everyone looking his way. "First of all, good work last night, lads. I know there was a hefty chunk of luck involved in your discovery, but you deserved a break after doing such a bang-up job getting yourselves involved with the natives. I passed the casino data onto MI5. They had some difficulty with the accounting software, but I got their initial report through 20 minutes ago. I've also asked to be sent all of the documentation on the Golden Sun Casino robbery. It should be coming over from Abbey Wood's Serious Crime Squad within the next couple of hours. Now, I've only had a few hours to get cracking, but I'll run you through everything we've discovered so far. First off, there's the discrepancy between the amount of money Leon made and the amount that was stolen from the casino. I spoke to the inspector in serious crime at Abbey Wood. The Golden Sun Casino only has a license for 15 table games and 30 slot machines. However, the police believe that a lot of illegal high-stakes baccarat gets played in 2 suites on the upper floors that aren't licensed for gaming. The amount stolen from the casino was probably much greater than the 90 grand that got reported to the police, but the casino owners couldn't report having a larger amount of cash on the premises without running the risk of losing their gaming license. I can also confirm that it was an inside job. The thieves knew the code for the burglar alarm and the combination of 2 safes. Secondly, the data James emailed to campus contained a full membership list for the Golden Sun. Leon and Sacha Tarasov were both members. Leon's account showed that he owed the casino over £6,000 when the records were stolen on May 16th last year. He was briefly investigated in connection with the robbery. "How come the cops didn't make any link to Leon?" James asked. John shrugged. The Golden Sun had over 1,000 members, 70 or 80 staff, and a few hundred others who've worked there in the past. It would have taken a team of 12 officers more than a month to track down and investigate every single suspect. The police just don't have that sort of manpower. Abbey Wood Serious Crime Squad has 4 or 5 officers, and they probably deal with 2 or 3 incidents per week. They might have pulled up Leon's criminal record at some point, but it's featherweight. There's nothing there that makes him look like a suspect in a major robbery. James smiled. On TV, you always see a whole room full of officers investigating one crime. Millie nodded. "That's right, James. But in real life, unless you're talking about something like murder or child abduction, you're more likely to find 1 or 2 officers investigating dozens of cases. At Palm Hill, we're 12 officers short, and we don't even have enough vehicles to go around. You have to book them out weeks in advance." John resumed his briefing. Thirdly, MI5 is still analysing the data, but they believe the 2 passwords written on the CD belong to employees called Eric Crisp, a part-time security guard, and Patricia Patel, who was a croupier. Millie looked like she'd been hit by a rock. "John, are you winding me up?" John straightened up in his chair and looked mildly offended. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Patricia Patel is married to Michael Patel, the officer who thumped James on Saturday night. Pat is Michael's nickname for her. I'd never even heard of the Golden Sun until this morning, but I knew she worked nights as a casino dealer. I babysat their daughter a couple of times last year when Patricia's mum was sick. I also had an officer called Eric Crisp on my squad. He moved out to Battersea when he got promoted to sergeant a couple of years back. He was best man at Michael's wedding. Then he picked up a nasty back injury and got invalided off the force. Everyone around the table exchanged shocked glances. Okay, John said, drawing a sharp breath. I was about to say that the next task for this investigation was going to be finding out who Patricia Patel and Eric Crisp were and establishing their links with Leon Tarasov, but it looks like Millie just filled in most of those gaps. What about Will? James asked. Where does he fit in with the robbery? That software was out of the ark, Dave said. It was obviously copied and stolen because it contained information that the robbers needed, on staffing or security or whatever. My guess would be that Patricia Patel or Eric Crisp copied the information across, which is easy, but they didn't have the expertise to get the software running on a modern computer. So they called in Will and he sorted them out. It's interesting that Will kept the data hidden inside the computer though, Millie added, still sounding shell-shocked. You'd have to be scared of someone or something to hide the information, rather than just delete it. Maybe Leon, or whoever, didn't tell Will what they wanted the data for, James suggested. According to Hannah, Will was a complete nerd, so he would have shat himself if he saw news about the robbery and realised he was an accessory to a major crime. Dave nodded. Especially if he was smoking a lot of dope. That stuff makes you so paranoid. Or so I've been told. The thing is, James added, when I spoke to Hannah, she was all like, Will was just a harmless geek. He either killed himself or got so stoned that he fell off the roof. But if he got mixed up in a giant robbery and Tarasov was scared that he might go to the police, couldn't he have got someone to go up on the roof and give him a little shove? John nodded. James is absolutely right, of course. We must now face the possibility that Will was murdered by someone linked to the casino robbery. Mind you, Dave said, if he was smoking loads of dope and stressing out over the cops nabbing him for the robbery, that might have been what drove him to suicide. Another valid theory, John nodded. I'll get hold of the coroner's report and police records relating to Will's death. We'll have to broaden the focus of this operation and try to learn everything we can about Michael and Patricia Patel, Eric Crisp, and Will Clark. We don't have an awful lot of resources though, Millie said. We've been stretched thin just looking out for Tarasov. John nodded. I know, but now we're looking at bent coppers and a potential murder investigation, rather than a local villain with too much money on his hands. I'm sure Zara will spare the resources to crank things up a notch. James spotted a tear welling up in Millie's eye. Hey, are you okay? He asked, reaching across the table and touching her wrist. He thought she was about to cry, but she rubbed the moisture away and exploded with anger. No, I'm not okay, Millie yelled, scraping her nails across the tabletop. I've been out hundreds of times with Mike and Eric covering my back. I was their superior. I wrote their appraisals, glowing appraisals. I lent Mike money when he was having a struggle after the baby was born. I pushed Crisp into taking his sergeant's exam. Those two must have been having a right good laugh behind my back the whole time. John tried to calm Millie down. Hey, there are a lot of bent cops around, you know. I was on the force and I've served alongside a few myself. They've made me look such a fool, Millie glowered. It's no wonder nothing ever sticks to bloody Tarasov if he's got half the cops in Palm Hill in his pocket. John dared to smile a little. 2 cops is hardly half the force. Millie shook her head. 2 that we know about, but there could easily be others. You know how it works, John. A big scandal breaking out amongst the officers in my squad means my career is down the pan. They won't sack me, but I'll be transferred well out of harm's way. Somewhere like the traffic department or the archives. James watched in horror as Millie froze briefly, then slumped forwards and burst into tears. I don't deserve this, she sobbed. The force has been my whole life since I left university. I've worked too hard. Too bloody hard.